We welcome you back to this channel. Today we present a special selection of the most impactful horror stories we've told. Each of these 7 tales has left a mark on our viewers, and we're sure they'll send chills down your spine as well. Go ahead, turn off the lights, and let's take one more step into the world of the unknown.
Midnight Delivery.
Some time ago, I was desperate to find a job. So when I saw a job post on Facebook for a pizza delivery guy at a nearby restaurant, I jumped at the opportunity. They gave me the job without asking anything. They didn't even check my ID. That was strange, but I didn't pay attention to such small details. The job started out fine. I worked the evening shift, delivering pizzas across town from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. But one night, something strange happened that changed everything. I got an order at 1 a.m. for the furthest area of town. The address seemed odd, and Google Maps couldn't find the building. When I asked my manager about it, he said they were a premium customer, so I had to go, even though the area was outside our domain. The delivery took me into the forest, to a huge old house that looked like a palace, more like a Victorian-style mansion. It was 40 minutes away from the city site. There was no electricity, and it was pitch dark except for a single light in a window on the second floor. Feeling uneasy, I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I knocked louder, and this time the door creaked open, but there was no one there. I was a little scared at this point, as nothing was normal about this delivery order from the very start. I turned on my mobile's torch to look around. The house looked like an 80s architecture, with antique furniture all around. There were many rooms around, and in the very center was a wide staircase to the above floor from where I saw a light before. I decided to take the stairs. As I reached the top, I saw a woman standing at the end of the long corridor, right in front of the room from where the light had been coming from. She was wearing a long white gown and had a candle in her hand. Most of her face was covered with her long back hair, making it difficult to see her face. I was getting mixed feelings at seeing her, as I wanted to just deliver the pizza and run away, but at the same time did not want to go any further. I approached her cautiously. Her face was mostly hidden by her long hair, but the candlelight in front of her revealed her red lips, forming a strange smile. A feeling of unease washed over me, and in my nervousness, my phone slipped from my hand and fell to the ground. I bent down to pick it up, but I froze in place. The light from my phone illuminated her feet, revealing something horrifying. They were twisted backward at a 180-degree angle. My heart seemed to stop beating as I slowly lifted my head to meet her gaze. Her expression had changed, now appearing serious and angry. Suddenly, she began screaming. Instinctively, I knew I had to run. I threw the pizza to the ground, grabbed my phone, and started running towards the way I came in. I could hear her growling behind me as I sprinted, my heart pounding in my chest. When I glanced back, I saw her crawling on the walls like some kind of wild animal, closing in on me. The doors and windows began slamming shut on their own as I raced downstairs, my legs trembling with fear. Just as I reached the exit, the door slammed shut in my face. Without hesitation, I smashed a nearby glass window and leaped out of the house. I started the motorcycle with labored breathing and sped off without looking back. I went straight to the police station and told them what had happened, but when they accompanied me, the house was in a different state. All the windows and doors were boarded up with wood, as if it had been abandoned for a long time. Even outside, there were bars closed with rusty chains and locks, indicating that no one had entered there for many years. But it was strange, as broken glass from the window I smashed to escape was still on the ground. The police claimed that the house had been in that condition for a long time. The pizzeria owner also denied having sent me to such a place. I never went back to that pizzeria. I can't explain what happened. I can only imagine that the owner had something to do with it and tried to make me the next meal for that monster or whatever it was. But fortunately, I managed to escape. I wonder if, before me, he had sent someone else as a sacrifice to that house.
The girl in the mirror.
In 2017, I ran a small bookstore with my friend Jessie. We loved decorating it with antique items, and whenever we had some extra cash, we explored stores for new decor pieces. That day, I remember Jessie was very excited and urged me to hurry up to get to a garage sale we'd been waiting for. We wanted to arrive before anyone else to snag the treasures we'd seen on a Facebook ad weeks before. One item in the ad caught my eye: a beautiful full-length mirror. We were already running late, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear, worried that the mirror might already be sold. We wanted to have that mirror in the bookstore no matter what. When we arrived, we entered a crowded space filled with all sorts of items. Despite our excitement, we couldn't spot the mirror anywhere. I asked Jessie if she saw it, but she couldn't find it either. It seemed like someone had already bought it. I decided to ask the owner if he still had it stored somewhere. I approached him. He was a tall man with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. I showed him a photo of the mirror and explained my interest in having it. He recognized the piece and said it was inside his house, where his mother had kept it. He invited us in. Inside, we entered an old kitchen with a strong, musty smell, where a frail old woman sat. She looked worn out and fragile. She had almost no hair, and her skin seemed rubbery. Her eyes were wide open, as if she had just seen a ghost. The man asked her about the mirror and if we could buy it. The old woman abruptly turned her head towards me and said in a hoarse voice that didn't seem to belong to her body, "You can't have it. Go away." That made Jessie and me very uncomfortable. We stepped back, realizing there was more to the situation than met the eye. The man apologized for his mother's behavior and said she wasn't well. He handed us the mirror, urging us to take it quickly. I asked about the price, but he said, "Just take it, quickly. I have to get back to my mom." I was surprised, but I took it anyway. All of that left us very uneasy and curious. We took the mirror back to our apartment, and once inside, we placed it in my room in front of my bed. Jessie was puzzled by what had happened, and I agreed, but I couldn't help but feel excited about the mirror. We admired the dark golden frame and intricate designs, pondering its true value. The unexpected and suspicious generosity of the man in giving it to us for free puzzled us. However, we chose to focus on its beauty instead. That night, as I was about to sleep, I happened to glance at the mirror and saw movement in it. My heart started pounding as I sat up, staring at it. Immediately, I put on my glasses and could distinguish a girl in a white nightgown reflected in the mirror. I blinked, hoping it was just my imagination, but she was still there. She was very real. I had never felt so much fear in my life, as I had never experienced anything like that before. I tried to call out to Jessie, but my voice wouldn't work. I could only emit a choked sound, as if an invisible hand were strangling me. The girl in the mirror smiled, looking directly at me with a cold expression. Her eyes were heavy and seemed intoxicated. I struggled, desperate to break free, but I couldn't. And at that moment, I could see the silhouette of that girl peeking out of the mirror, like a window from her world to mine. I could see my room getting darker and darker. Reflexively, I could only close my eyes. I could hear her approaching, but I didn't want to see her. I wished I could cover my ears at that moment and pretend she wasn't there, but I couldn't move. I knew she was close, and at that moment, I heard her speaking to me. I didn't understand clearly what she said. Her voice sounded very deep, and I refused to believe what was happening was real. I guess I passed out at that moment because the next thing I remember is finding myself on the floor, gasping for air. The room was quiet, and the mirror no longer reflected the girl I had just seen. Jessie entered my room very confused and helped me up. I ran to the living room without looking back and told her what had happened. I couldn't stop trembling, and I could remember and understand what the girl had said to me, "This mirror doesn't belong to you. Return it." At that moment, we knew the mirror held something sinister, something the old lady knew. With trembling hands, we wrapped the mirror in cloth, sealing it, determined to protect ourselves from that ever happening again. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. The next morning, we returned to the old lady's house and simply left the mirror at the entrance and left without saying or asking anything.
Hide and seek.
When I was young, we used to go to my grandpa's house for vacations as it was away from the city's hustle and bustle. It was a big house, more like a mansion, with great Victorian-style furniture and interior, and a big lawn. It was the best place for vacations. That house was inherited by my dad after my grandfather passed away. My brother and I were the most excited about the move. At that time, I was around 12 or 13 years old, and my brother Josh was 10, in the afternoon. I remember very well the day we arrived. The house was huge. Everything was going great, and we were having fun, but soon we started getting bored in such a big house with just the two of us. We decided to play hide and seek. I asked Josh to hide, and I would start finding him after counting down to 10. Josh followed through and ran to hide. I counted to 10 and then opened my eyes, starting to look for him throughout the whole house. Such a big mansion, it was difficult to find him. I searched in every corner of the house. When I finished looking in the living area and moved to our room, I passed by the stairs, and that's when I heard something. A sound like something falling down. When I looked upstairs, I heard those footsteps, as if someone is running. I knew it was Josh, and now I knew he was up there, so I ran upstairs and followed the footsteps. I was now in my grandpa's room and had scanned it all. When I was about to leave, I heard giggles coming from the bathroom that I had forgotten to check. I smiled and silently went, slowly opening the door without making any sound. I scanned the whole area, but found no one. The only place left was the bathtub. I quickly moved the curtain, and to my amazement, there was no one. I was positive that I heard the giggle from the bathroom, and now I was there all alone. How was that even possible? It kind of scared me, and I was about to leave when I heard footsteps. I was terrified and quickly hid in the tub, pulling the curtain closed. I thought it must be Josh, but my instincts told me to hide. I heard it approaching. It was my Josh's voice, but something was off. That was not how Josh normally talks. His voice had a strange tone that sent chills down my spine. He was maliciously laughing and calling my name to come out. Not any 10-year-old boy could ever do that. My heart started beating fast. I could hear it thumping loudly. And then I put my hand over my mouth when I heard that laugh change into screams. He was screaming at me to come out. Those soft footsteps had turned into heavy footsteps. Through the bathroom curtain, I saw a large silhouette with a hat approaching. I was just praying that whoever it was wouldn't open the curtain, but he raised his hand to do just that, and suddenly I was there. Was water in the tub and drowning. The silence in the room had turned into my gasps, coughs, and bubbling like a muffled sound. It was as if someone was forcing me underwater, and I was struggling. I tried so hard, and all of a sudden, it all vanished. I looked around, but there was no sign of anyone, and I was not wet at all. I was scared as hell. I ran downstairs, and I saw Josh sitting at the dining table, fed up from hiding for so long. He started complaining that I didn't find him. I knew the person I saw was not Josh. Even though I heard his voice, it couldn't be him. I told my parents everything, and they quickly believed what I said, which I thought nobody would. I got a high fever that stayed for days, and I had dreams of that person approaching and chasing me for years. My parents didn't tell me about it until many years later. I was cleaning the store with my dad when we found some of Grandpa's stuff, and Dad shared a very disturbing story. Grandpa had another brother who committed suicide by drowning in the second-floor bathtub. Nobody knows why he did that. At that moment, they did not tell me anything because I was a child, and they did not want to scare me further. I don't know why it happened to me, or maybe it wanted to tell me something. I don't even know if it was something good or evil. But still, to this day, I'm afraid of going to that house, especially in that room.
Harry.
About 3 years ago, I used to work in an antique store in our town, right at the corner of the market, owned by Mr. Shin. The owner of the antique store had a massive collection of all kinds of antique items in his store. It wasn't just his business. It was his passion, too. He lived in the upper story of the building with his wife and spent most of his time with his antiques. He was quite an interesting man, I must say. At that time, I was broke and looking for part-time jobs, and I remember he was the one who helped me out. I really owe him for saving me back then. Soon, we developed a good relationship. Sometimes, even his wife would come, and the three of us would talk for hours. I admired his personality and the way he took care of things in his store. He even had a hobby of collecting dolls. He had dozens of dolls of all kinds. Then everything changed when he bought that ventriloquist doll. It seemed quite old, and, to be honest, very creepy. From the very first moment, it didn't give me good vibes. It had big blue eyes that always seemed to be staring at me, shoulder-length curly hair, and a sinister smile that was just plain ugly. Anyone would get nightmares from seeing that doll. I don't know what Mr. Shin saw in it that he bought it. Not any normal person would dare to buy such a thing, but he wasn't an ordinary man. But after that day, his behavior changed. He would spend most of his time talking to that doll, asking it one-sided questions. It even had a name now, Harry. At first, I thought maybe that's just how he treated his new dolls, whoever came into his collection. But no, that wasn't the case. A few days later, Mrs. Shin came to me and told me something is wrong with her husband. She told me that he spent all of his time in the store, and when she came downstairs at night to check on him, she found him talking to the doll. She had asked him many times to get rid of it or stop spending time with it, but he would get aggressive. She was worried, and so was I, because his behavior had changed drastically. He wasn't the same old Mr. Shin anymore. He had become possessive and aggressive. It seemed like he had changed into a completely different person. Mrs. Shin and I believed it was all because of that doll. So, we decided to hide it when he wasn't there. I hid it in a cabinet in the store. When Mr. Shine returned, he started looking for his doll and calling out for it. After searching for a while and not finding it, he started asking us where it was. But we didn't tell him. Suddenly, something came over him. He became so aggressive that he started destroying things in the store while searching for that doll. I can't even describe it. He looked so horrible, as if he was possessed. He had no idea what he was doing. He was breaking most of his precious things that he had spent so much time and money on. He cared about his stuff the most, and now he was just destroying it for the doll. It was crazy. In the end, I told him where I hid it to stop him. He ran to the cabinet, took out the doll, and hugged it. He kept saying, "Don't worry, baby. Daddy is here, and Daddy will save you from the bad people, always." After that, he took the doll and went to eat with it. It really scared Mrs. Shin. Mrs. Shin even called a Chinese psychic. In the evening, the psychic arrived with different spells written on rectangular papers in Chinese. She placed them in specific directions, lit some incense, and started chanting something in Chinese. It was some kind of ritual. She called it a cleansing ritual that would expel the bad entity from the store and their house automatically. But instead of that, something really bad happened. Everything in the house started moving. The antique store items began falling on their own, and then Mr. Shin arrived. He started screaming at her to stop and grab the papers with the spells, trying to halt the ritual. I tried to intervene, but he threw me away. That was my last day at that store. I quit my job and decided not to get involved with that entity anymore. A few days later, I found out that Mr. Shin was getting a divorce. It was clear he wasn't sane anymore. How was Mrs. Shin supposed to live with him? And then, after a month, Mr. Shin committed suicide. Sometimes I pass by that now closed antique store, with the windows covered with newspapers, but I always avoid looking inside for fear of seeing that doll still there.
The ritual in the forest.
When I was a child, we spent summers in a small cabin by a lake in a remote forest. It was our family refuge, where my father taught me to fish while my mother prepared country lunches. The forest was a place of mystery and fantasy for me, full of tales about creatures hidden among the trees. That summer, my childhood curiosity led me beyond our usual territory. Intrigued by the whispered stories of shadowy figures roaming the forest told by locals, I ventured alone into the woods in search of adventure. It was then that I saw the first of them. She was a tall, thin figure dressed in black rags that seemed to merge with the darkness of the trees. Her long, tangled hair fell over her face, her skin was dry and cracked like the bark of an ancient tree, and her long, dirty nails suggested a forsaken humanity. I watched as she silently collected mushrooms, unaware of my presence. Intrigued, I decided to follow her unnoticed, eager to learn more about these creatures that had captivated my imagination. She led me to a hidden clearing among the trees, where several female figures gathered around an improvised altar. Flickering torches illuminated the space with a flickering, sinister light. The witches chanted in a language that resonated in my mind, although I did not understand a word. In the center of the clearing, one figure stood out among the others. She was an older witch, even more menacing in appearance than the rest. I watched with a mix of fascination and fear as the witches danced in circles around her, moving with a hypnotic cadence that mesmerized me for a moment. A sense of awe and danger overcame me when all the witches simultaneously bowed in reverence. That's when I saw it. Beneath the main witch's long black dress, I could clearly see grotesquely large, twisted bird-like legs. They were covered in dark scales and ended in sharp claws that sank into the ground of the clearing. Around her, black feathers floated in the air as if suspended by a dark and unknown magic. Fear paralyzed me. I had never seen anything like it before, something that defied all logic and understanding. The witch with bird-like legs loomed over the others, emitting a presence that seemed to alter reality itself around her. My hands trembled as I slowly backed away, feeling the forest closing in around me like a living, stalking labyrinth. The witch's laughter echoed in my ears as I ran as fast as I could, stumbling and falling in my desperate escape. I felt their presence lurking in the shadows, as if the forest itself conspired against me. Terror drove me forward, tearing my skin on branches that closed behind me. Finally, I reached the edge of the lake where my parents were quietly fishing, completely unaware of the horror I had just witnessed. Upon seeing me, my mother let out a gasp of surprise at the sight of my scratched arms and legs and my pale, terrified face. My parents surrounded me with concern, asking me what had happened. I couldn't hold back. Between sobs and broken words, I told them about the witches and the dark ritual I had witnessed. My father frowned in disbelief, while my mother hugged me tenderly, trying to calm my tremors. Together, they conducted a brief investigation around the clearing in the forest, but found nothing out of the ordinary. My parents attributed what had happened to my excited childhood imagination, fueled by stories of the forest and local tales. They urged me to forget what I had seen and promised never to leave me alone in the woods again. Although I tried to accept their explanation, the images of the witches and their ritual continued to haunt me in my nightmares for years. Now, years later, I still return to the forest in search of answers, driven by a growing obsession with the unknown. My visits are an attempt to decipher whether the witches and their ritual were real or simply a product of my childhood imagination. However, the forest seems to have changed, and I find no trace of the hidden clearings or mysterious figures.
Imaginary friend.
Babysitting wasn't the job I imagined having while I was a senior in high school. I was paid a decent rate per hour for watching kids who only needed to have an adult around when their parents were out. After all, it wasn't that tough of a job, as most of the time it was during night hours. All I needed to do was wait until the children fell asleep, and then I was free to do my own stuff. I usually did my schoolwork during that time. This was just another job on a Thursday night. I drove to the house, got there exactly on time, and met the parents. They were newly moved to the town. They had a party and told me that they would be gone for 5 to 6 hours. It was already 6:30, so this was another late job. They introduced me to their kids, Harry, who was around 10, and Jenny, who was around 6 or 7 years old. They also told me that this was their first time leaving their kids home alone with someone, and they were sensitive. I assured them not to worry, and I'll take good care of them. When the parents left, I watched a cartoon show with them for some time. They were quiet and innocent kids. Around 7:40, I told them it was time to go to bed, but they insisted on playing with me. Finally, I agreed on the condition that after playing, they would go to bed straight away. They agreed, and I asked them what they wanted to play. Jenny said something very weird. She wants to play hide and seek. I was kind of confused and asked her who said that. She replied, "My friend." It was really awkward because there was no one else around except for us three. But she was a little kid after all. I thought she might have an imaginary friend, so I just brushed it off at that time. I asked them to hide, and I would find them after counting down from 1 to 10. The house was large, making it a perfect place for hide and seek, and it was difficult for me to find them as I wasn't familiar with the layout. I counted down from 1 to 10 and opened my eyes. They were gone. I started searching for them, calling out their names as I moved through the hallways. The kids raced through the rooms, giggling and enjoying the thrill of the chase. I heard their footsteps running up the stairs, and I followed them. The stairs led to a big, dimly lit hallway. I was slowly taking my steps forward while telling them I was going to find them. That's when I saw something strange. I saw 3 children running instead of 2, who went into the room at the end of the hallway and closed the door. My heart raced. I thought I must have mixed things up because of the low lighting. I approached the room they went into. I was about to open the door when a chill ran down my spine. I heard 3 different voices. I didn't know how that was possible. I hesitated and quickly opened the door, but it was locked from the inside. I asked them to open the door right away, still hearing that 3rd voice. Suddenly, the door unlocked. I rushed in, and when I entered, I saw both of them sitting on the floor, each playing with a doll. If they were both sitting there, then who opened the door? I was kind of scared. I checked the whole room to see if anyone else was present, but I found no one. I sat on the floor near them and asked what they were doing. Harry replied, "We are playing." I asked them who opened the lock, and Jenny said she opened it, while pointing to a side where there was no one but a doll on the floor. I asked them about the doll, but they said, "She is playing with us." I was shocked. I had never been that scared before. I asked them to go to sleep right away. I laid them back in their beds, turned off the light, and rushed back downstairs to the hall. I really wanted to leave, but I couldn't leave the kids alone with whatever that thing was. I spent the rest of the time waiting for their parents to return. When the parents got home, I told them I saw someone and heard something unusual, but they did not respond to that and pushed me away, saying that I was overthinking and it was just my mind playing tricks on me. They were acting strangely, so I went back to my house. Something very strange had definitely happened. Luckily, they didn't call me back. I still don't know if I would have agreed to babysit their children again.
Melina's shadow.
Since I had the encounter with this, I don't know what to call it, entity, ghost, I see things differently. I couldn't believe something like that was real until I experienced it. I started dating Melina 4 years ago, Shortly after, due to our jobs, we had to spend a lot of time apart from each other. It was difficult to meet since we didn't live close to each other either. We decided to spend some time together at her apartment. She lived on the second floor of an old building with very dark hallways. Her apartment door had a small frosted glass window, one of those where you can only distinguish silhouettes through it. The day I arrived to stay at her apartment, I looked through that window and could see a silhouette standing inside. I remember thinking it was her, but just before I rang the doorbell, I heard Melina calling me from the hallway. She said she had gone out to buy some things before I arrived. I asked her if there was anyone else in the apartment, to which she replied no. I tried to ignore that, thinking it was just my imagination, as it's difficult to distinguish things through frosted glass. We started living together, and everything was fine until one night when I offered to make her coffee. While she was watching TV, I went to the kitchen to prepare the coffee. I remember putting the cups on the shelf, but when I turned around, they had disappeared. I opened the cupboard and found the cups there. Thinking maybe I had made a mistake, I put the cups back on the shelf. But when I turned around this time, the cups had disappeared again. I was surprised and called Melina for help. I told her what had happened and asked her to be the one to take the cups out of the cupboard. She handed them to me, and everything was fine this time. I tried to ignore the incident, and we went to sleep. The next morning, while I was brushing my teeth and looking in the mirror, it fogged up out of nowhere. That was very strange because I hadn't turned on the hot water at that moment, and there was no steam coming from anywhere. I immediately left the bathroom and told Melina what happened. We went back together, but the mirror was back to normal. She suggested that maybe I was overthinking things or feeling stressed at work. The next night, while we were sleeping, I suddenly heard someone calling my name. I woke up and heard a strange noise coming from outside. I went to check and saw that the objects in the kitchen were moving and vibrating. I was shocked and rubbed my eyes, but it was real. Everything was moving. I ran back to my room and tried to wake up my girlfriend, but she was in a deep sleep and didn't wake up. I didn't know what to do, but after a while, it all stopped. I was afraid, so I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. The following night, something even strange happened to me. I heard the sound of something breaking. It was as if someone was throwing kitchen utensils on the floor and breaking them. The noises were so clear that I was sure someone was doing this. I woke up Melina and asked her to check if what I was saying was true and if there was someone in the kitchen. She woke up and we went to the kitchen to investigate, but everything was fine and nothing was broken. Melina was sleepy, so she got a bit rude with me, and we went back to sleep. The next day, I was very disturbed and confused. I wished I had left that place that day, but I did not. That night, I heard the noise of broken things from the kitchen again. I decided not to go out and ignored it. I turned opposite the room door and closed my eyes. Suddenly, the noises in the kitchen stopped, but then something closer could be heard, falling in the living room, then in the hallway, then closer in the bathroom. It was as if something was approaching the room, knocking things over as it went. The final thud was the picture that was hanging on the wall in the hallway in front of the room. The noises were very clear to me. I couldn't believe Melina was still asleep. At that moment, the door opened. Things in my room started falling and vibrating. I turned on the bed and suddenly lost the power to move my hands and legs. I was lying straight with my eyes open. I saw a giant black shadow on the door, and the next second, it was standing right in front of me. Its eyes were red and very big and scary. It clearly said to me, "Get out of here." After finishing saying that, he disappeared from my sight, but I could feel him retracing his steps, exiting through the bedroom door, through the bathroom, through the hallway, through the living room, and all the way to the kitchen. I took a deep breath and sat on the bed. I noticed that Melina was asleep. I mustered up the courage and went ahead to close the door. The next morning, I collected all my belongings and left the house. Melina kept saying that it might have been my imagination, but I never returned to that house. I continued my relationship with Melina for a while, but eventually, we broke up. I had never experienced anything like that before, but now I always inquire if a house is haunted before entering it.
Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.